Wind gnawed at the timber balconies of Echo Peak like a starving animal, peeling slivers from the once glossy cedar rails and flinging them across the frozen courtyard. At the center of the courtyard, a fire barrel nicked from an abandoned ranger station coughed pale blue flame, the only punctuation in a landscape trapped beneath permanent cloud. 24 years had passed since the tariff decree detonated the economy, spinning a chain reaction of scarcity, riots, and finally the desperate deployment of weapons too awful for peacetime imagination. What America remained lay fractured into weather-bitten pockets, each community an island in a continent of wreckage. Echo Peak, a ghost of its former ski resort self, clung to life on a plateau above the ruins of Interstate 70. The old gondola lodge stood gutted, windows stuffed with stitched plastic tarps, insulation replaced by carpets nailed over the studs. A generator, one of the last working diesels in the county, rumbled 3 hours each evening on reclaimed fryer oil, only enough to illuminate the mess hall and recharge the shortwave rigs scavenged from FEMA vans. Solar panels cracked by hail quit every second day. Wind turbines froze when rime ice locked their yaw bearings. Still, the people here endured. They cultivated mushrooms in the dismantled locker rooms, coaxed potatoes from bags of soil dragged up from the valley in mule trains, melted snow for drip irrigation, and waited for a spring that no longer reliably arrived. Inside the mess hall, the lamp strings trembled, their weak radiance staining the tables in amber blotches. 5 teenagers hunched around the radio cradle on the back wall, the speaker hissing with static too harsh for comfort yet too precious to muffle. The eldest, Maya Salas, 17 winters old and the de facto cartographer of Echo Peak, kept one gloved finger on the volume knob, her other hand clutching a spiral notebook furred by pencil smudges. Beside her sat Rafe, shoulders knotted with restless energy, tapping Morse against the metal bench. Ezra and Joe leaned close enough for their breath to frost on the varnished pine, while Cammy, smallest of the crew, pressed her ear to the grill as if the static itself whispered secrets. Rafe broke the silence first. "It's there again. 444-0. Then the long burst. "That's our beacon." "It might be," Maya corrected, pencil twitching over the coordinates. "Or it might be another ghost reflection off the pass. The ionosphere is meaner than usual tonight." Across the hall, a blast of frigid air announced the entrance of Shep Dunn, the resort's reluctant mayor and survivor of 2 malicious sieges. Snow salted his beard. He stamped his boots, shaking his head at the cluster of teenagers. "You're burning diesel," he growled. "If that's not an emergency signal, kill it." Maya straightened, chin high. "Sir, we think it is." Same pattern as yesterday. The timing matches the Army field codebooks. She tapped the notebook. Group Foxtrot 4 is shelter intact, supplies present. Group 0 means hazard, unknown. Shep's eyebrows knitted. "And you think it's coming from the ridge above Last Chance Chute?" "Close. The triangulation gives us a sweep from the northwest, maybe 1 kilometer beyond the top lift tower. That puts it under the avalanche crown." A hush inhaled the room. Everyone remembered the crown, a cliff of fractured snowpack where the late February slide had torn loose half the mountain face, burying chairlifts like splinters. Search parties found 2 bodies, but never the maintenance shed rumored to house a pre-war supply depot. GPS satellites were long dead, only the cold, skittering code pulsed through the storm now, a cadenced heartbeat from whatever lay entombed in ice. Ezra's voice carried a tremor he tried to smother. If that beacon's real, there could be medical kits, canned protein, maybe even replacement turbine bearings. Shep paced, boots thudding. Or there could be rad barrels, landmines, any devil's bargain the old army left to rot. "We can't spare people for a ferry hunt. What if we go?" The words shot from Maya before she could swallow them. She saw Rafe's grin flash, Cammy's eyes widen. "We know the ridge lines. We've practiced with the beacons. And we're light, less likely to trigger another slide." A beat passed. Then another. Shep clasped his hands behind his back, staring at the smoke-black rafters. Everyone in Echo Peak knew the ledger of rations, cupboards thinned by the week, squirrel meat stretched with pine needle flour, generator filters frayed like burlap. Echo Peak needed a miracle. Finally, he exhaled. "You take the dogs, the emergency locator, and 1 working radio. At first light, you check in every hour. You cross a line you can't crawl back from, I'll march the militia out and drag you home by your collars." Softness shadowed his eyes. "If the mountain lets you live that long." Dawn seeped across the plateau in bruised violets and rose-tinted grays. Wind-sculpted plumes off the ridge, loose snow twirling like powdered glass. Maya's team assembled at the ruined gondola bay. Maya, Rafe, Ezra, Joe, and Cammy, each strapped into layered salvage gear, denim under tarp cloth, duct-taped boots, goggles carved from visor plastic. 2 Malamutes, Halcyon and Brick, wagged against the leash ropes. Maya shouldered the pack with the radio set, its copper coils heavier than any textbook she once lugged to a long-condemned school. The avalanche transceiver hung over her chest like an iron stethoscope. As they set off along the abandoned service road, the valley below whispered with the memory of chairlift chatter of tourists cheering après-ski cocktails. Now the only music was the rhythmic crunch of crampons and the whimper of flumes swirling across drifts. Half a mile in, the path vanished beneath Windslab. They veered west, following red-painted stakes driven last autumn as part of Maya's mapping project. Every stake shimmered with rhyming frost, some were snapped clean, shards pointing nowhere. A kilometer later, they reached the canyon where the February slide had spilled trees like jackstraws. Slabs of compressed snow rose taller than the resort's remaining chimneys, streaked with pine boughs and carbon soot from a burned-out snowcat. Rafe steadied his breathing, then flung a grappling hook into a hollow where the snow met an upthrust boulder. The line went taut. Maya led first, planting ice axes, hungry to feel her muscles answer a task larger than survival's daily ankle-deep grind. Ezra guided the dogs behind him, whispering steady commands. Joe checked the Geiger counter Shep had insisted they bring. The needle stayed mostly calm, flickering only when cosmic rays pricked through a break in the cloud. Radiation still haunted lowlands where reactors erupted decades ago, but the high Sierra air was usually clean. Usually. Atop the avalanche debris, they found a windswept plateau, unsheltered but strangely serene, like a graveyard after mourners departed. Here the beacon sounded louder through the headset, a triple pulse rising above static intervals. The teens formed a circle, antennas tilted, cross-bearing the source. Maya scribbled the intersecting angles, recalculating slowly, as her math teacher once drilled, measure twice, assume the world will still lie. It's under the cornice, she concluded. About 200 meters north-northwest. Cornice is overhanging, Joe warned. Warm air from the thermal vents might have hollowed it. Step wrong and we get the express ride to the gorge. Rafe flashed that grin again, wind drying his lips. Then we step right. They advanced single file, each footprint punched deeply, each breath gusting in the hush. The sky dimmed as new snow thickened the cloud blanket. Somewhere to the east, thunder boomed, a slab cracking free on another peak, distant but reminding them of the mountain's appetite. Maya's transceiver beeped, strobe lights flicking red. The beacon's signal abruptly shifted pitch, morphing into a rolling pattern none of them had heard. Dash dot 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 dash dash dot dot dash dot. Rafe snapped his head. That's not distance data. That's cipher call signs. Ezra's memory flickered to bedtime stories his father once told about radio men in the climate wars, how intel ran through layered codes, primary beacons for location, overlays for instructions. Could it be deliberate? A message waiting for ears alive enough to decode it. Cammy unslung her own notebook, flipping to a fragile leaflet she'd bartered from a librarian in the valley, an abridged copy of Field Manual 452E, Signals of Station Echo. Her finger tapped the pattern. Sentinel Snow Ghost, she whispered. That's what they called a Type K emergency bunker. Rafe's grin collapsed into a tight-lipped line. Ghost bunkers were biocontainment vaults. Maya forced calm against her ribs. And sometimes supply arcs, sealed stores meant for repopulation. It depends which blueprint the Corps used. Her gaze hardened. Either way, if there's medicine, Echo Peak needs it. They pressed onward until the ground trembled beneath an unseen cavern. A low hum rose, mechanical, subsonic, as if the earth itself exhaled. The dogs bristled. Maya signaled halt. Ahead, the snow surface sagged slightly, a shelf bridging empty space below. Joe prodded with her pole, the tip sank, revealing an air gap near 15 centimeters. We need a rope crawl, Maya said. Spread the weight. They laid a line across the shelf, harnessing themselves at 2-meter intervals. One by one they slid on bellies, distributing force. Halfway across, Rafe radioed back, thermal patch below, steam venting. Watch for melting pockets. Sweat chilled under Maya's collar as she followed. The ice hissed where her breath touched it. When they reached firmer ground, relief faltered because the firm ground was not ground at all. It was oxidized steel, dull and pitted, stretching into the drifts like the back of a buried leviathan. A black stencil, barely legible, read property of United States Army, Snow Ghost K Sector. Beside it, a recessed hatch waited behind a rind of translucent ice. Ezra knelt, pushing away snow to expose a crank wheel. Rust flaked under his mittens. He worked it, muscles trembling. Nothing. Joe produced a collapsible blowtorch, sparked it with flint, kissed the rim of the wheel until seized gears groaned. After 10 agonizing minutes, the wheel budged. Steam whistled. A puff of pressurized, stale air moaned through seams. And then came the roar. Not from the hatch, from the ridge above. A sound like a giant ripping a cloth sky. The cornice fractured, fractal fissures spidering across its lip. Maya spun, eyes wide. Run. But snow outran them. The shelf they just crossed shattered. A plume of powder detonated upward as thousands of tons of snow avalanched, devouring the gorge in white fury. The shockwave slapped them flat against the steel bunker lid, air muscled from lungs. The world dissolved to static larger than any radio could carry, a white noise cannon drowning every other sense. Seconds stretched into an age before silence trickled back, revealing the 5 teens half buried atop the sealed hatch. The rope line saved them, anchored against the steel, spare loops now draped in fresh accumulation. Cammy coughed, laughter mingling with sobs. Rafe patted Halcyon, who barked once, tongue flecked with rhyme. Maya's heartbeat pounded in her ears, louder than the beacon. She pressed the headset again. Remarkably, the triple pulse continued, unfazed by nature's tantrum, as if whatever lay inside Snow Ghost had waited too long to fall quiet for anything so trivial as an avalanche. Wind died to a hush. The sky, momentarily cracked by sun, revealed High Cirrus glowing champagne pink. All paths back to Echo Peak were gone, buried under meters of new debris. Only the hatch offered shelter, promised danger. The teens exchanged a wordless vote, the dogs whined approval, tails smacking snow. Maya tightened her gloves, set her grip on the crank once more, and turned. This time the wheel groaned, then spun half a revolution. The hatch clanged open a centimeter, exhaling a breath warm enough to fog her goggles. A stairwell descended into saffron glow. Half-legible symbols flickered on a panel inside. Joe aimed her torch, revealing letters pulsing behind grime, power level critical, auto-wake override, biolock disengaged. A gloved hand, Maya's own, though it felt like someone else's, reached for the threshold. And down the corridor something answered, a metallic chime not unlike the beginning of speech. Sulfur-tinged warmth kissed their cheeks as they lowered one by one through the hatch, boots ringing on ribbed aluminum treads. A sodium lamp hidden behind safety glass buzzed with the sullen insistence of an insect, painting everything in tarnished brass. The stairwell curved, a spiral pressed tight against a cylindrical shaft, until it disgorged them into an antechamber lined with rows of impact-absorbing foam, now brittle with age. Ember spots of emergency LED scuttered across the ceiling, illuminating a maze of arrows and cryptic alphanumeric tags spray-stenciled in olive drab, K-Beta 3, MED Delta, HVAC core. The stale air smelled of engine coolant and long-extinguished campfires. Maya's pulse still hammered from the avalanche, but adrenaline sharpened every sense. Inside her gloves she felt each twitch of tendon, as though her body were trying to tattoo the moment on memory, the clank of the bulkhead ceiling behind them, the slight tremor underfoot, a generator's heartbeat somewhere in the dark. A hiss of hydraulics answered when she pressed the panel beside the inner door, but the lock remained stubborn, status lamps winking amber. Joe pried the casing with a flat bar, exposing circuitry caked in frost. Cammy knelt, flashlight between her teeth, soldering iron already warming from a portable battery pack. While they worked, Ezra and Rafe surveyed the chamber. A cabinet of HASS suits sagged open, latex yellowed and cracking. Under a plexiglass lid lay 3 carbine rifles whose polymer stocks had delaminate into strips. Rafe's knuckles danced across a box of flare rounds, most corroded shut, but near the bottom he found 2 vacuum-sealed tubes still pristine. He tucked them into his pack without comment. The inner door thunked and slid aside, revealing a hallway whose walls were scabbed with rust but intact. At the far end, a bank of monitors hummed, their screens awash in static snow. The 5 teens fanned out, guided by a faint violet glow leaking beneath a side door marked biostasis. On impulse, Maya stepped toward it, but Ezra gently pulled her back. The Geiger counter twitched as its wand neared the threshold. Nothing catastrophic, but the hairline rise on the dial hinted at isotopes best respected. They left the room sealed, noting it on Maya's precious map. Past a second bend, they found the command nexus, a horseshoe console emerging from the floor like the prow of a wrecked ship. Layers of dust softened its hard edges, yet when Rafe brushed the surface, faceted indicator crystals flickered to life, casting phosphor halos across their faces. A chime repeated every 7 seconds, the same metallic tone they had heard topside. On the main display, a message pulsed in block capitals. Auto-wake protocol delayed. Reactor fuel at 6%. Critical functions suspended. Requesting authentication SIG/Victor Sierra 4. Maya swallowed. 6%. If we draw more than lighting, she'll flatline. Cammy flipped through her manual. SIG/Victor Sierra 4, that's a voice print handshake tied to encryption keys. Her voice dropped to a whisper thick with awe. This terminal was meant to talk to satellites. Joe frowned. Satellites died at the beginning of the resource war. Not all of them, Ezra ventured. Dad said DoD launched fallback birds in 2036, low-orbit CubeSats hardened against EMP. They carried atomic clocks for navigation mesh. He tapped the console. If this bunker can ping them, we could resurrect positioning across the plateau. Freight caravans, drone mapping, everything Echo Peak lost when GPS went dark. But we drain the core, Maya answered. Her mind spun across options like beads on an abacus. Unless we can refuel the reactor or tie in a new energy source. Rafe jerked a thumb toward the overhead ducts. Vent shafts. We can cut louvers, drop turbine strings, rig a VAWT in the storm winds. Enough to trickle charge the cells. And freeze to death trying, Joe muttered, though not unkindly. They pressed deeper. Rows of storage lockers yielded windfall treasures, freeze-dried meal blocks stacked in shuttle cargo nets, crates of heat packs, a spool of copper wire thicker than Rafe's thumb, worth its weight in morphine back home. In a refrigerated bay, they discovered ampoules of broad-spectrum synthbiotics printed by military biolabs before the collapse. Each label bore the eagle crest and a timestamp from the year 2046. Cammy cradled an ampoule, tears sudden and bright. There's enough here to keep Echo Peak alive for 2 winters. A deeper corridor sloped odd for an underground fortification and ended at a freight lift sealed by scissor gates. Beyond the grate, pulsing emergency strobes revealed a cavernous hangar, the far wall vanishing behind steam curling from a fissured floor vent. Printed across the deck in letters 3 meters high, Project Sirocco. Ezra ran the word through memory. Sirocco, hot desert wind. He knelt by a terminal recessed in a pillar, coaxed it awake. Schematics projected into the air, drawings of high-altitude drone swarms, aerosol canisters, stratospheric heaters. Weather modification, he murmured. They built the winter on purpose. Joe's eyes flashed. But why ice up their own cities? Ezra touched a note embedded like a footnote on the plan, Operation Frostlock, Denial Strategy Tier 2. He read aloud. If global trade hostility surpasses threshold gamma, employ hemispheric cooling to stall adversary food production and trigger capitulation. His voice dimmed. They weaponized the sky to win tariff wars that had already burned the world. Rafe slammed a fist into the pillar, leaving a spiderweb crack. Killing us to cure us. Typical old America play. Maya drew him back. It also means this facility probably holds the override codes to stop the snow. For a heartbeat, everyone stared at her, mingled with raw fear. Outside, the world choked on the eternal winter born in these corridors. Here, perhaps, slept the keys to thought or to bury the planet forever. A klaxon bleated across the hangar as if awakened by their very thought. Lights strobed blood red. The grate rattled, servomotors whined, the lift platform jerked. On its deck someone stood, at least the silhouette of someone, in tactical armor the color of dirty marble, visor aglow with scanner LEDs. In its gauntlet hands rested a rifle too sleek for pre-war human manufacture. Ezra froze. Autonomous sentry unit, he breathed. Should have been offline. The visor word focusing. A synthesized baritone boomed, unauthorized access detected. Identify. The word identify repeated, louder, resonating like a gong. Rafe raised his empty palms. We're survivors. The snow tried to kill us. We mean no harm. The plea echoed weak in that cathedral of metal. Voice print negative, the machine answered, then pivoted. A muzzle of mirror black tracked them. From the corner of her eye, Maya spotted a broken catwalk above the sentry, its metal grates yawed where corrosion had removed bolts. She yanked Rafe's sleeve, whispered, diversion. Rafe didn't hesitate. He flung a flare tube high across the hangar. It clanged between crates, igniting in a spew of white magnesium. The sentry swiveled. Maya vaulted, grasped a dangling cable, swung for the catwalk. Her boots slapped iron. 2 boards screeched loose beneath her weight, dropping sparks toward the sentry's helmet. Joe and Cammy hauled themselves beside her while Ezra dove for cover behind a turbine cowling, dogs barking in frenzy. The sentry fired. Blue-white arcs sizzled, tracer strings of capacitive discharge bludgeoning the catwalk supports. Steel glowed orange. Under Maya's feet the entire span sagged, hinges popping like corn kernels. Instinct overruled training. She sprinted off the opposite lip, crashed hard onto a storage crate that exploded in a drift of desal packets. Pain flared through her ribs. She rolled, ears ringing. Joe had landed better, already dragging Cammy behind a forklift skeleton. Reactor room. Joe shouted, pointing to a service hatch marked restricted power module. Maya nodded, sprang, weaving between metal debris as arcs shredded the air overhead. Rafe lobbed the second flare directly at the robot's visor. The magnesium flash seared its optical sensor, and for 3 seconds blind rage made it fire wild into the ceiling. That was long enough. Maya wrenched the hatch crank. Inside whirred a cylindrical fusion battery encased in boron carbide. She located a maintenance panel labeled Coil Coolant Manual Override, Danger, Cascade Shutdown. Without hesitation she twisted both levers to red. Warning strobes erupted. Coolant pump screamed, then halted. Back in the hangar the sentry halted mid-stride, gyro stuttering. A monotone chanted core instability, security priority 0. The visor flickered. Its rifle drooped, muzzle spitting a dying spark. Then, like a marionette with cut strings, the machine collapsed. Silence returned, broken only by distant drip of condensation. Rafe collapsed too, laughing, hysteria laced with triumph. You starved its power rail. Maya exhaled, legs rubber. And we have maybe 20 minutes before the battery cooks off. She scanned the readout, coolant temperature skyrocketing, autonomy modules shutting down. If the battery failed it might bathe the bunker in neutron fire or just melt into slag, rendering Project Sirocco data unreadable. Neither option was acceptable. Ezra hustled to a network blade server, praying the drive heads hadn't seized. A field of hollow tiles leapt up, illuminating his soot-streaked cheeks. I can brute force copy the Sirocco archives, but I need power and time. Maya assessed the tangle of conduits overhead. We repurposed the Sentry's capacitor. It's an ultracap enough to juice the server for a data dump. Rafe was already dismantling the disabled robot, fingers flying, Cammy assisting with bits from her solder kit. Within minutes they fed thick cables into the capacitor housing, bridging it to the server rack's auxiliary port. Ezra hammered keys. Terabytes flowed across optical links toward a portable solid-state bank no larger than Cammy's palm. On screen, progress marched by agonizing tenths. Meanwhile, Joe and Maya jury-rigged an improvised cooling loop, packs of desal ice slotted into the fusion battery's vent fins. The dogs hauled a cargo sled loaded with every coolant canister they could find. Gauge needles quivered just shy of the red. 43%, 59, 76. A siren blared, new alarms, containment threshold reached, ventilation required. Overhead fans coughed, then died as the main energy rail starved. Sweat froze on lips, breath hung in glittering plumes. 91, 97, completed. Ezra yanked the databank free. Got it. He sealed it inside a leaded pouch. At that precise instant the battery shrieked like a wounded predator. Metal casing bulged. Without discussion they sprinted for the access stairs, Brick and Halcyon bounding ahead. Behind them the fusion core spat a jet of incandescent plasma that climbed the shaft ceiling, fusing gantries into a molten spiderweb. A shockwave followed, hurling them up the last flight onto a side passage. They tumbled, ears ringing with the basso thunder of collapsing infrastructure. When the roar settled to groans and pops, Maya discovered they lay in a corridor she hadn't mapped, one that sloped subtly upward, perhaps toward a fresh egress. A faint breeze tugged her hood, carrying air that smelled not of coolant but of pine and ozone. Overhead, the cement had cracked, revealing sky through ribs of rebar. Late afternoon sun speared the dust, igniting motes like fireflies. Rafe whistled low. Avalanche carved us a skylight. He looked to Maya, eyebrow raised. Shortcut home. She glanced at the data bank in Ezra's grip, at the crates of medicine behind them, at the battered faces of her friends, no longer merely teenagers but veterans of a private war. Not yet, she said, voice quiet but resonant. Sirocco changed the world once. We need to know if these codes can undo what it did without killing everyone left. Joe flexed a bruised shoulder. Which means we can't lug the meds out until we're sure the mountain won't vaporize the stash. Ezra patted the pouch. We take this back, analyze with ion cache on the data tower. Shepshem rig can broadcast a D-packet request to any surviving climate nodes. Cammy wiped soot from her cheek, leaving a streak like war paint. And if we find a shutdown sequence? Then, Maya said, we bring Spring home. They scavenged sled harnesses from the wrecked supply racks, loading 24 ampoules and a coil spool small enough to drag. The dog strained, eager despite exhaustion. As the sun slid west, spilling apricot light over shattered summit cornices, the 5 survivors climbed into the breach and emerged onto a slope sculpted new by the avalanche, strange, perilous, but passable. Below them Echo Peak waited, smoke threads from evening cook fires curling in the distance. Beyond that, valleys where other enclaves scratched out existence beneath the forever blizzard. Maya imagined them slipping on earphones that night, hearing a whisper across static, proof that someone out there had found a forgotten code and decided to try. She imagined warmth spreading, not from reactors or bunker heaters, but from hope. Behind her, deep inside Snow Ghost, the last embers of the fusion core guttered out, leaving only silence and the faint echo of a satellite handshake unanswered for 2 decades. Ahead lay descent, then decision, then the unraveling of secrets older than their births. Wind curled around her like a question. Hours before dawn, Echo Peak's watchtower lanterns winked Morse along the ridgeline, beckoning the expedition home. Maya and her friends limped through the outer gates with cheeks raw from windburn and packs sagging under their clandestine cargo. No cheering greeted them. People were too practiced in the economics of disappointment, but as word leaked that the teens had returned alive, a hush of collective inhalation spread across the resort like a fuse waiting for flame. Shep Dunn strode into the courtyard, coat flaring, rifle slung, but safety off. His eyes darted from Brick's foam-flecked muzzle to the silver databank clutched in Ezra's mitten grip. He said nothing, simply extended both hands. Ezra surrendered the pouch. Shep's thumbs brushed the hazard stripes as though confirming the device was real and not the mirage of a starving mind. Then he motioned the group toward the mess hall. Inside, bunkhouse bunks had been pushed back to make space for the Hamrig command post, a sprawl of Saldiscard breadboards, scrounged oscilloscopes, and a tower PC sustained by cannibalized gaming GPUs salvaged from pre-collapse basements. Nadia Juarez, Echo Peak's resident signals engineer, peeled off her welding visor and blinked at the newcomers. When Maya set the ampoule crate on the workbench, Nadia's knees nearly buckled. Shep caught her elbow. Medicine. Real, date-stamped, unexpired. The watchtower lanterns dimmed by comparison. Yet Maya's gaze fixated on the server rack, a ribcage of blinking LEDs that represented the community's mind. Feed the drive, she told Nadia. We need to see what kind of death switch we're holding before we pop any corks. They seeded the solid-state bank. Fan spun, code scrolled, hash checksums raced across the monitor like fireflies. Then directory trees bloomed, Project Sirocco /control /Stratos drones /climate models /shutdown protocols. Nadia whistled, low and afraid. Rafe leaned over her shoulder. Just tell me it's as simple as sending stop. Not even close, Nadia said. Looks like multi-step authentication key to orbital nodes. Each node needs a signed sequence or it rejects the cascade. Do we have the keys? Ezra tapped a folder named Keyring, but an access console demanded SIG/Victor Sierra 4, the voice-print handshake they'd already bypassed inside the bunker by starving power. No such brute force option existed here. The software required a matching biometric imprint hashed against an old Department of Defense archive. From a cot in the corner, Dr. Iris Lang, the settlement's physician, cleared her throat. She'd been inventorying the antibiotics with trembling hands. Keys or no keys, we have triage to run. We're down to 17 canisters of potable water and 9 bags of mold-free grain. Her gaze shifted to Shep. If the codes promise a bigger ice melt, we need to move fast. Shep rubbed his temples. You're asking me to gamble the last soul of this mountain on 15-year-old Pentagon math and a voice print we don't have. Maya stepped forward. Then find someone who does. Silence answered until Rafe spoke the name everyone despised. Boardwalk City. Boardwalk, a settlement sprawled across the drained skeleton of Lake Tahoe's casinos, was a barter hub omnivorous in its appetites, weapons, reagents, flesh. Its warlord, Colonel Emerald Kane, claimed a blood lineage to the old Nevada National Guard. If any enclave preserved archival voice prints, decoded, cataloged, weaponized, it was Kane's memory vaults. Shep's jaw tightened. We trade there under escort. Strictly supplies, never secrets. Kane's spies drink contraband like water. Which is why we don't tell them what the keys open, Joe countered. We say it's cold boot firmware for de-icing med drones. They'll laugh until we flash a few ampoules as collateral. Dr. Lang bristled. You trade medicine already earmarked for children. For a summer for everyone, Cammy interrupted, voice thin but flinty. The mess hall filled with the hush of truth that cuts deeper than arguments. Shep's shoulders sagged. Pick 6, he ordered Maya. You leave at first light. Rafe, your point. Ezra and Joe on comms cart. Cammy rides shotgun with the meds. I'll assign 2 rangers and the fastest dog team. No one else. Dawn spilled brass over the Sierra when the convoy, 3 sleds on composite runners, harnessed to 8 muscular Malamutes, slipped down the ridge road. For the first time in years, frost did not squeal underfoot. Instead, a thin crust softened into slush, and from distant trees the sound of rivulets trickling beneath bark whispered rumors of thaw. Snow Ghost's reactor might be dead, but perhaps a butterfly of chaos had already flapped. They descended switchbacks scarred by old shell impacts, past charred lodgepoles where neon survey banners still fluttered from the days government's pretended reclamation was possible. By noon they reached the valley where I-70's asphalt emerged from drifts in black shark fins. Here Shep's rangers split away, promising to shadow from the ridges. Silent as prayers, one murmured, vanishing into pine. The highway basin housed ghosts of caravans robbed years ago, burned rig shells, airbrushed company logos flayed by ice. Yet new tracks carved the snow skids of steel runner sleighs headed the same direction. Boardwalk had commerce. It paid bounties for scrap copper, seafood canned during the last functioning Alaskan fishery, and rumors of technological relics. Word traveled that Kane's lieutenants were assembling a road train south towards Sacramento ruins where feral militias sold black market lithium. By dusk the convoy crested Spooner Summit. Below, Tahoe's frozen sheet reflected the vermilion sky in cracked mosaics. On the southern shore, boardwalks glow pulsed like a malignant aurora, string lights powered by diesel stolen from desert pipelines, neon scavenged from casino marquees, LEDs fed by pedal generators manned 24 hours by indentured cyclists. A perimeter of shipping containers ringed the settlement, stacked too high and painted with lurid murals, snarling wolves, pin-up queens in radiation masks, the slogan Traders Freeze, Traders Feast. At Gate 12, guards in mismatched Kevlar demanded tollware, ammunition, or antibiotics. Ezra produced a single ampoule, the guard sniffed, licked his lips, and waved them through. Inside, scents bombarded them, sulfur from tarnished cooking oil, pine tar torches, tang of fermenting mushrooms. Speakers blared swingbeat remixes of old campaign anthems. Merchants hawked Geiger-sterilized jerky, counterfeit insulin, antique VR headsets wired to solar cells. Over all towered the skeletal remains of the Montbleu Hotel, now Kane's citadel, its shattered windows patched by armored shutters. Searchlights roved like disinterested gods. They tethered dogs outside a bar called the Polar Parlor, where salvaged gondola cars served as booths. Within, a brass stove kept frost from the beer lines. A hush fell when the teenagers walked in. Outsiders under 20 were rare commodities. From a velvet booth a woman in mirrored goggles beckoned. Maya recognized the insignia on her lapel, a data broker, one of Kane's archivists. Too soon, she thought. Information flowed here as snowmelt flowed downhill. But they could not reach Kane's vaults without intermediaries. Maya signaled the others and approached. The broker introduced herself only as Softshift. Her voice was mod-glitched, shifting pitch with each phrase, a habit of black market linguists. When Maya claimed they sought the VS4 voice print for drone firmware, Softshift chuckled. Rare bird. Colonel Keep's legacy clears locked in cold stack. Not for sale, darling. But maybe exchange. She brushed 2 fingers over the ampoule Ezra offered. Pretty tonic. Yet the Colonel measures value in leverage, not syringes. Bring him something unforgettable and he'll open the choir books. Rafe leaned in. Define unforgettable. An heirloom of the old order. A symbol, a secret, a scandal. Something that blurs the boundary between myth and proof. Maya's brain raced. What artifact rivaled a climate kill switch? Her mind flashed to the bunker's hangar the disabled Sentinel unit Seb had cannibalized. Its casing plate, embossed with the U.S. Great Seal and serial numbered in the final production block, lay in Rafe's sled bag awaiting trade for spare turbine gears. A gleaming, irrefutable relic of pre-collapse militarism. Collectors would kill for less. She whispered the idea. Rafe's expression folded into a scowl, but he unstrapped the plate. Softshift's goggles reflected its surface like molten silver. She licked crimson lips, nodding. Follow. They crossed Boardwalk's central plaza where bartered slaves pushed ancient snowblowers, chewing the ice for water bars. Guards saluted Softshift. Elevators in Montbleu's gutted atrium no longer worked. They ascended emergency stairs lit by hurricane lamps. On the 13th floor they met the Colonel. Emerald Kane lounged in a throne fabricated from slot machine carcasses, draped in a cloak made of casino felt stitched with silver thread. A breathing mask piped filtered air beneath jade-framed glasses. When the teens presented the plate, his laugh rolled like dice down a green baize table. Snow Ghost, K-Sector, he drawled. I bid 5,000 meal credits once for rumor of that unit, and here children deliver proof. His gaze flicked to SoftShift, the broker bowed. Kane toggled a brass lever on an antique intercom. Quartermaster, prep the vault phonograph. Moments later they descended into the hotel's basement, deeper than Maya's sense of direction liked. Through a maze of corridors they reached a room where racks of vintage tape reels and optical discs hummed at glacial RPMs. A technician configured a microphone, its membrane coated in gold leaf. Speak code phrase, Kane instructed Maya, so the machine may calibrate. Maya hesitated. SoftShift's hand brushed a holster. Maya cleared her throat and recited the generic string from Sirocco's metadata: Icarus rising, vector leeward, standby sequence. The reel-to-reel ka-chunked, imprinting her spectral signature for playback alignment. Kane then produced an unlabeled cartridge from a cryosatchel. It sleeps with my greatest lullabies, he said, voice host to eerie pride. He slotted it into the phonograph. The speakers crackled, then a masculine voice, calm, deliberate, tinged with Midwestern vowels, spoke the handshake, Victor Sierra 4 requesting orbital echo confirmation. The technician sliced the waveform into a digital file. Rafe's breath hitched. That's the president, he whispered, barely audible. Indeed, the timbre belonged unmistakably to Donald Trump, a recording likely captured during bunker tests before the meltdown of 2025. If Kane knew, he showed no thrill, he traded in inevitabilities. Transaction complete, Kane dismissed them with cordial malice. We are square, he said. But were I you, I'd hurry from my city. Secrets of such magnitude shine like auroras to scavengers. SoftShift escorted them to the service exit. Under sodium alley glow she paused. Colonel Reed's future's in risk. He'll keep your artifact, fine. But he'll also gossip that children chase the weather. By dawn 10 militias will ride for Echo Peak, hunting whatever you know. Maya's stomach flipped. She thanked the broker with 2 ampoules. SoftShift smiled, already half a legend, then melted into darkness. Back at the sleds they found Brick whimpering. Harness ropes were slashed. Her ampoules gone, and the coil spool. Tracks led north toward the old Heavenly Ski Village, a warren of smugglers. No time to pursue, their true prize nested in Ezra's chest pocket, the Trump voice sprint keyed to orbital ghosts. They raced toward the perimeter. A searchlight painted them white, shouts rose. Apparently Kane's private calculus had shifted again, perhaps a whisper from SoftShift, perhaps mere paranoia. Bullets cracked the night. Rafe blew a magnesium flare into the face of a guard, and the dogs bolted. What followed was chaos sketched by tracer arcs across frozen lake flats, sleds skidding, dog teams yelping, engine growls of snowbikes in pursuit. Cammy threw smoke canisters swiped from Kane's own armory, plumes of violet cloaked their escape. On the open ice the snowbikes proved faster, but ice proved treacherous. 2 machines plunged through thin sheets, sinking with screams abruptly silenced. The remaining pursuers peeled off, unwilling to trust the Springsoft shell. Hours later, safe on forested slopes beyond State Line Pass, Maya's convoy slumped behind a granite outcrop. They drank melted snow and listened to wind harps in the pines. Ezra plugged the phonograph file into the ham station. The waveform aligned, encryption suite accepted it with a melodic chime. Hearing unlocked, its contents unfurling lotus-like, satellite uplink tables, fail-safe countdown scripts, atmospheric heater polarity reversals. If executed in full, the protocols promise to raise tropospheric average temperatures 4 degrees Celsius over 3 years, enough to restore rainfall patterns, enough to collapse fragile snowpack, enough to drown coastal enclaves hanging on by pontoons. Rafe stared at the lines of code as though they were spells from forgotten Bibles. All life for all life, he murmured. Who decides the tide? Joe pointed at a comment header. Cascade may be paused at regional choke nodes. We can throttle it, she said. Pilot thaw cells over test zones. Observe. Scale of safe. Where's safe when deserts flood and glaciers vomit? Cammy countered, voice cracking. Maya felt the weight of mountains settle on her shoulders. But another weight stirred inside her, a memory of children wheezing in moldy infirmaries, of ration lines where elders traded heirloom wedding rings for freeze-dried turnips. If chance at spring existed, it could not be hoarded like relics in Kane's vault. She knelt by the fire barrel they'd kindled. Flames painted her friends in gold. One choice sits before us, she said softly. We ride home, patch the mesh network, broadcast a partial unlock, test the Sierra first. We watch rivers. We share data, invite every enclave to vote. Not a decree, but a covenant. Ezra nodded, resolve sharpening. Joe offered a bruised smile. Cammy wiped tears, then squared her tiny shoulders. Rafe poked the fire with a broken ski pole. Democracy in a blizzard, he said. Hell of a ski run. "We'll carve it," Maya promised. A branch snapped behind them. Shep's rangers melted from the brush, faces smeared in soot camo. "We've trailed your blizzard of trouble all night," the lead ranger said. "Boardwalk's warbands gather, they'll march come dawn. We hold high ground for now, but Echo Peak needs her kids and her medicine." Maya rose. "Then we hurry. And we teach a mountain to vote." 2 days later, the teens crested Echo Peak's saddle, dogs frothing yet unstoppable. Behind them, low on the horizon, columns of black smoke marked the advance of militias scavenging in their wake. Inside the resort, volunteers rigged receiver dishes on every roof tile that hadn't blown away in the last gale. Nadia spliced cables, eyelids fluttering sleepless. Dr. Lang distributed diluted antibiotics in triage tents. Shep paced the parapet, binoculars fixed on the valley. Maya delivered the key files, Nadia patched them through the tower PC. A climber scaled the comm mast to realign Yagi antennas toward the OG CubeSats. Then came the jump code, Victor Sierra 4, this is Echo Peak Sirocco, override. Authenticate cascade handshake. For 7 heartbeats nothing answered. Then space itself whispered, static parted like curtains, and a digital voice, cold as starlight, replied, authentication accepted. Awaiting regional indices. Ezra exhaled, hands trembling over the keyboard. He loaded Sierra Nevada grid coordinates, rechecked fail-safe throttles, then glanced to Maya. "Democracy," she said. She toggled the resort's loud hailers, broadcasting across courtyards and snow tunnels. Her words echoed off iced facades. She told them what they'd found, what risk thought carried, what past sins laced the code. She asked for a show of voices, not hands, because vents carried sound better than ballots, every citizen to shout aye or nay at first chime of the summit bell. And when the bell tolled, a roar rose, ragged but determined, weaving through pine corridors, bouncing from chairlift towers, gathering until it became a singular imperative, begin. Ezra pressed execute. Satellites accepted new orders, dormant stratospheric heaters chirped awake, redirecting power arcs. Above the troposphere, microdrones pivoted fins, refracting solar bands in patterns meant to loosen winter's jaws. Invisible currents shifted. Hours later, as Boardwalk's warbands reached the base of the mountain, sleet thickened into heavy, wet flakes, anomalously warm for March. Avalanche sirens wailed, slopes destabilized not from cold cracking but from melt shear. Kane's lead riders abandoned snowbikes sinking in slush, their engines drowning. They retreated, firing frustrated rounds into thawing cornices that answered with thunderous slides. The mountain had chosen its allegiance. Evening found Maya on the lodge balcony where we first met her, notebook forgotten. She watched drops of water run down cedar rails, carving paths through grime. For the first time since before she was born, she heard water drip, not icicles splitting, but genuine liquid finding gravity. It smelled like promises. Yet far to the west, a bank of bruised clouds gathered, sign that climate did not yield without protest. Echo Peak had set history in motion. Where it rolled was anyone's guess. But Maya felt the weight on her chest lift a fraction. There would be more votes, more codes to balance, more enemies whose power shriveled when scarcity did. Still, the melt had begun, and no bunker or tyrant could refreeze the idea whose time had come. Warm rain, something no one under 20 in Echo Peak had ever felt, arrived on the 3rd night after the satellites accepted the Sierra Index. It started as a patter on the ruined gondola cars, tentative as shy applause, then thickened into a steady musical drumming that lasted until dawn. By sunrise, the resort's parking lot had turned to blackwater, reflecting the skeletal lifts, and pockets of dark earth modeled the slopes like bruises on an alabaster arm. Pine branches, freed from the ton weight of rime, snapped skyward with audible cracks. Needles that had slumbered 20 winters exhaled a resinous perfume so intense it bordered on narcotic. The melt was everything Maya Salas had prayed for, and nothing she had imagined. 2 weeks earlier, she'd pictured a gentle, orderly spring. Drifts dissolving by centimeters, rivulets feeding culverts, patients watching green shoots push through window boxes. Instead, water gushed in violent sheets down service roads, pruning entire switchbacks from the mountain. Sheds built on permafrost sank as ice foundations rotted overnight. Infirmary tents swarmed with biting flies hatched from eggs frozen since the era of functioning passports. People celebrated 1 hour, cursed the next, scurried to sling sandbags, dug new drainage ditches, repitched tarps, and prayed feverishly that the century-old earthen dams below Echo Peak would hold. At first light, Maya joined the flood crews while Rafe and 3 rangers climbed the western ridges to dynamite cornices before they could bury the settlement in wet slab avalanches. Ezra and Nadia remained glued to the ham rig, coaxing enclave after enclave onto the voting mesh. Some responded with gratitude. Starved hamlets in Utah that had ice-locked orchard trees, coastal fish tangle villages who saw in thaw the promise of resuming slug traffic across gray seas. Others spat curses. Desert communities whose only shield against drought had been the relentless blizzard funneling melt into their cisterns. In Oregon, Firetown elders swore they would shoot down any drone that warmed their sky by a single degree. Democracy in a blizzard, indeed. Dr. Lang triaged outbreaks of trenchfoot and waterborne coliform. Medicine from snow ghosts slowed the casualties, but no drug could blunt the sheer physics of climate upheaval. Every hour the data tower's servers thrummed as Nadia throttled heaters on and off, sculpting isotherms like a blacksmith tempering steel. Yet the system was designed for strategic denial, not humanitarian finesse. Algorithms kept overshooting, triggered by cascade feedback in the upper jet. Dial back too much and sky temperatures nosedived, spawning hailstorms that shredded the first saplings poking through slush. Nudge forward and clouds burst like ruptured levees, drowning makeshift culverts. In the gloaming of the fifth day, Maya gathered her original crew in the mess hall, silence occasionally punctured by the thud of water slamming the downspouts. Fatigue had bleached their faces, but purpose still burned. A map spread across the table displayed satellite overlays, ghostly in their newfound clarity, of the entire western seaboard. Glitches still pocked the imagery where drones failed, but the composite revealed a terrifying truth. The rivers were coming alive in serpent-fast convulsions, carving new braids through towns whose planners had long forgotten floodplain codes. Sacramento's ruin gleamed as an inland sea. Boardwalk's container wall, engineered for static ice, now sagged like a half-melted horseshoe, half the shanties abandoned for higher casino floors. And racing straight toward Echo Peak's drainage basin was an ink-black bloom of soot-saturated meltwater, the industrial runoff of battery smelters abandoned upriver, now spewing oxides loosened from their rusting vats. Joe stabbed a finger at the screen. If that slurry reaches us, it poisons every mushroom trench we've got, and it arrives in 48 hours. Ezra dropped his head onto folded arms, voice muffled. We can throttle the regional warmers again, snap the freeze line southward, buy time, but we choke desert enclaves just when their cactus harvest germinates. He lifted tortured eyes. Every tweak steals life from someone. Cammy, the youngest but seldom the quietest, said, "Then we need another tool, not brute heat, something that filters the water before it kills." Silence, save for the percussive rain. Rafe exhaled hard. Snow Ghost's hangar wasn't just weather toys. Remember the vent crawlways we never explored? The drone service decks might hold atmospheric scrubber pods. Early war scientists tested zeolite filters on vehicles the size of vending machines. We were too busy outrunning a fusion meltdown to look. Maya felt a pulse of savage hope. They'd be buried under half a mountain of slag by now. Buried, Rafe agreed, but not inaccessible. The avalanche carved new chutes, daylights bleeding into parts of Snow Ghost nobody has seen since commissioning. We could shove a team down, pull the pods, rig them in the river mouths. Not elegant, but a charcoal filter the size of a boxcar can polish a lot of poison. Joe's eyebrows knitted. And Kane's warbands? We may have slush-whipped them, but they'll come back once they find amphibious gear. Every unarmed back turned to the west is an invitation. Maya rose. Decision shaped itself like a blade in her mind. We split. A strike team hauls back the scrubbers. The rest fortify the pass, flood or no flood. Eyes met hers, not seeking permission but verifying resolve. They found it. Descent into Snow Ghost, Episode 2, proved uglier than the first. Spring freshet had bored tunnels under the debris sheet, rendering old anchor points unreliable. Rafe led with customary swagger disguised as recklessness, pounding pitons into ice that howled under the melt. Maya followed, torch jammed between teeth, lungs curling with the stink of rotting sisal rope abandoned by search grid engineers decades earlier. Below the original hatch they discovered fresh cavities where glacier water sluiced through the bunker's ruptured ventilation stacks. Steam hot, sulfur-laced steam, wafted up, telling of the fusion core's dying but still fierce heart. They navigated on knotted ropes across twisted gantries until entering an annex labeled Aerosolation Chamber Beta. Inside, ceiling lifts supported 3 vehicles reminiscent of armored food trucks, except their roofs were bristling with telescopic intake funnels. Along one wall, an instruction stencil read, Mobile Airstream Filtration Unit MAFU-03 for deployment in contaminated basins. Power autonomy, biodiesel or turboshaft. Output, 91% particulate capture below PM 2.3. Jo whistled despite herself. They built Brita pitchers on tracks. Each MAFU still bore tags securing hatches. None had been commissioned. The first unit's diagnostics panel, when jerry-rigged to a battery jumper, flashed an amber code. Fuel cells desiccated. But the second powered on, software clocks holding date stamps only a week before the bombings that had buried Sirocco in secrecy. The third flickered erratic, then came alive fully, onboard AI announcing, in crisp pre-collapse marketing cheer, its readiness to serve. Cammy caressed the console, laughter laced with wonder. They're speaking to us. Let's hope they're friendlier than the last robot we woke, Rafe grunted, prying the wheel brakes. Okay, we'll tow Unit 2. Unit 3 drives itself if we can coax fuel from the dead diesel tanks near the gondola workshops. Fuel, it turned out, was human muscle and melted snow. Biodiesel tanks at Echo Peak's kitchen waste dumps still held congealed soybean grease. A day's boiling and straining produced enough amber sludge to feed both MAFUs. They fitted towing skis, lashed dogs to improvised harnesses, and with curses, coaxing whistles, and the occasional shove of a crowbar against frozen treads, pulled 2 40-ton filtration trucks through crumpled avalanche corridors toward the Valley River. During those hours, Maya glimpsed, in flashes, the first electric belief returning to the faces of her people. As the convoy creaked past militia ramparts, engineers with bandaged hands cheered. Old men limped from shanties to touch the truck's paint, as if verifying solid reality. Children not yet sick from mold-scrawled names on the dust panels. River Saver, Springsmith, Hopebox. While Maya's strike team hauled Salvation downhill, Boardwalk's second assault thundered from the south on amphibious half-tracks salvaged from drowned marine depots. Colonel Kane rode the lead LVT. Casino felt cloak swapped for a scuba dry suit. Respirator lenses tinted emerald. He guessed correctly that Echo Peak had pivoted from heat to filters, and filters could not defend themselves. His convoy forded slush gullies, anchoring cables up the mushy benches by which the avalanche had once collapsed. He advanced in columns of 4, turrets clicking. But Echo Peak's defenders, under Shep and Nadia's direction, rewired the weather drones one last time. They refocused satellite heaters not on the broad troposphere, but in needle-wide beams. They buried Kane's route under micro-blizzards of flash-frozen supercooled water. The effect was a patchwork minefield. Trucks that strayed into wrong GPS grid squares found themselves glued in instant ice cement. Continuous tracks locked, engine blocks cracking as coolant turned to slush. Others punched through slushy patches onto warm, sloped rock and flipped, disgorging men into chocolate runoff. Meanwhile, Shep's Rangers deployed on skis above Treeline. Rifles compensated for shrinking air resistance. They fired only when Kane's units freed themselves from the weather traps. One warning shot in armor plate, just potent enough to redirect but not kill. For every truck captured intact, Echo Peak's engineering crews ripped out turrets, bolted on storage tanks, and integrated the chassis into an expanding water scrubber fleet. When Kane finally accosted Echo Peak's outer wall, now a hasty barricade of snowcat carcasses, he discovered the mountain garrison unarmed, holding jugs of mire skimmed from the toxic flood. Shep radioed an open frequency. "Colonel, this is what your trade city has been drinking. We are giving it back." With that, volunteers poured the stinking slurry down the rock face, where it seeped into Kane's forward trenches, dyeing his boots black. The colonel gazed upward at the towers where cables hummed messages from enclave to enclave, each node broadcasting data logs of filter efficiency and sickness rates plummeting. He watched alpine streams below sparkle under a sun unimpeded by drone flares, and he realized the war would not pivot on bullet count but on narrative. Whether Boardwalk remained a predator economy or reinvented itself again as distribution hub for life, Traitors feast, traitors freeze, his motto suddenly brittle. Kane ordered his banner lowered. Gun barrels depressed, then reversed ground. The siege ended not with a shot but with a shipment manifest. His quartermasters sent crates of lithium scavenged near the desert ruins. In exchange, Echo Peak technicians agreed to clone the filter AI into Boardwalk's grid and share heater throttling schedules. Soft Shift, unseen since her alley warning, encoded the accord into a base 64 signed ledger and blasted it across the mesh. Viral diplomacy took hold faster than slush could swallow a canton. Spring accelerated. Snow line retreated upslope so fast it looked like white curtains drawn by invisible hands. Rivers still raged, but Mahfuz gulped them in twin columns and exhaled water clear enough to glimmer where silt once reigned. Downstream settlements logged their first safe drinking samples in 21 years. At Echo Peak, Nadia's servers ran hot compiling votes from dozens of enclaves. The question evolved, not simply whether to continue the thaw, but how to chain governance among people born in disconnected silos. Shep called it hardwired confederation. Dr. Lang preferred mutual caretaking. Rafe suggested keeping everyone too busy fixing things to shoot each other. Joe built a UI that visualized impact models. Cami added a comment layer where farmers could tag indicated rainfall with field observations and where desert nomads posted sunrise photos of sprouting bristlebush. What began as a network of ham chatter matured into the Sierra Cooperative, first transregional digital republic of the post-tariff age. The cooperative never spoke unanimously. Democracy proved as messy as meltwater, but certain axioms congealed. Data is bread. Raw sensor CSVs would always flow open and free, signed cryptographically but viewable by any enclave screen, thus nullifying monopoly. Tools beat weapons. Any captured war hardware must be convertible to civil use before the next solstice or surrendered for scrap to the cooperative foundries. Heat belongs to no throne. Uplink codes for satellites resided on 5 mirrored servers across the West. Any throttle changes required multi-sig approval representing alpine, desert, and coastal blocks. Colonel Kane, ever opportunist, embraced the doctrine publicly, renaming Boardwalk Freeport Tahoe, and boasting of its retrofitted casinos now purifying camper graywater. Privately, of course, he accumulated goodwill tokens, but in democratic strains even cynicism can fertilize growth. 3 months into thaw, pine seedlings erupted between half-collapsed lift pylons. Mushrooms receded from locker rooms as humidity found balance in breezes clearing under new convection. Dr. Lang performed the first childbirth in Echo Peak proper. A girl named Juniper, born while melting icicles drummed lullabies on tin roofs. The baby carried antibodies thanks to penicillin S3 cultures from Snow Ghost, proof that secrets can feed futures when unlocked rather than hoarded. Maya, finally pausing long enough to breathe, climbed the ridge at dusk one evening, notebook under arm. From that vantage, she saw a valley now stroked with ribbons of green. Farther west, a string of sodium lamps traced where Freeport crews laid rail from casino scrap, aiming to reconnect Reno enclaves with mountain water stations. Eastward, thunderheads pregnant with moisture marched beyond Carson Gap. Too much rain if left unchecked. She pinged Nadia, suggesting a 2% heater rollback. Less than an hour later, the drones accepted. Wind teased her hair, warm and pine-sweet. She thought of her younger self huddled by static-spitting radios, hunting rescue in meaningless beeps, of Soft Shift's glitching voice, Kane's greed, the snow that tried to erase them. She remembered lifting the bunker hatch after the avalanche, dogs barking at the sulfur-lit stairwell, and felt an echo of that same electric decision. Step through the threshold, whatever waits. Rafe appeared, lugging a wooden box smelling of diesel and cherries. Inside lay chips of glacier ice blown free from high crevasses. Blue crystals older than recorded time, now melting quick as sugar. Figured you'd want a souvenir, he said, sheepish. Everything's changing faster than we can write it down. Maya took a shard between fingers, watched it drip. Then we keep writing. Histories, maintenance manuals, nursery rhymes. Stories are filters too. They trap the poisons of forgetting. Below, Echo Peak's summit bell rang thrice. Signal of incoming message on the cooperative mesh. Ezra's voice crackled. amplified valley-wide. Attention enclaves. CubeSats report temperament stabilization across Sector Alpha 5. Precipitation normalizing. Fire risk moderate. Vote results tallied. 72% in favor of pivoting heater arrays toward Northern Plains drought relief. Operation Prairie Rains commences at midnight. Maya smiled. New horizons, circular as orbit but wide as hope. She turned to Rafe. Ready to ride? He shrugged. Always thought apocalypse would be the end. Turns out it's just upstream maintenance. He offered a hand. She took it. Together they descended a slope gleaming with newborn grass, toward floodlights where engineers welded rails. Kids chased dry ground for the first time, and elders learned to pronounce words their tongues had forgotten, like planting, springtime, and tomorrow, because tomorrow at last had room to grow.